Hi, my name's Deepak Shukla. I'm the founder at Pearl Lemon. Across the course of the last 7 years, I've probably looked at over 5,000 resumes. I've probably interviewed over 1,000 people. At this point, I've lost count because there's been businesses previous to that. And I want to share with you the lessons that I've learned through the hiring process and the patterns that I've seen in people across the board in companies that I've run previously and concurrently alongside Pearl Lemon, the patterns that I've seen for the people who tend to impress, become outstanding performers, and are able to achieve phenomenal results in a really short amount of time. So if you are looking to further your career at Pearl Lemon, then welcome. My name's Deepak, as I said, and we'll probably be meeting at some point. So that's just the first point. If you are ultimately a person who's looking to further themselves in terms of their career, then I definitely recommend that you stay and continue to watch this video. This video will be focused upon anyone who's looking to work in a remote and distributed team. The reality is that it's been a long time past since I've worked in an office environment. It's at this stage been more than 15 years. So for those of you who fall into those buckets, I'm going to share with you the lessons that I've learned and the insights that I have as to how you can ensure that you become one of the top performers outside of the experiences that I've had, having had 23 jobs before I was the age of 25, having started and first worked at 12 years old as a paper round boy, and then going on to work at the local cinema, working at the local bank, working on market stalls, putting up the actual stalls, labor on construction sites, working in reception at schools. So I've had a long history of a lot of jobs actually behind me that a lot of people don't know about. So I've had a long history of employment, actually, funnily enough, not in terms of years of experience, but volume of roles. There's been a lot. 23 before I'm 25. I've worked flat packing boxes in factories. I've worked alongside people from the Far East putting together mobile phones on a conveyor belt in a factory as well. I've done all of these things and more. So the first thing to fundamentally understand is not being afraid at any level, and it relates to some of the experiences that I've mentioned, not be afraid to get your hands dirty. So what I mean by that is you invariably, especially for those people that are part of small dynamic teams, you will invariably be required at some point or benefit from doing things that don't fall neatly inside of your job description. So one of the patterns that I've noticed is that people that tend to perform really well take it upon themselves to solve problems or to figure out solutions to problems that they are not ultimately directly responsible for. So the thing that you need to understand when it comes to peak performance is never a case of just fulfilling the line items on a job description. In any given environment, that's actually what leads to ordinary performance. And this is a big misnomer with people that individuals, if it's you expect salary progress, you expect rewards for doing the very thing that you expected to do in the first place. So so the top performers that I see that tend to do well understand that all of the value lies outside of the words that are written on your job description. Because oftentimes, depending upon the role that you're going into, unless your role is incredibly highly specific and specialized, or you have an unorthodox or extremely unique skill that you bring to the market, the job description, and here's the interesting part, the job description in and of itself is a commodity because there are 100 other people that could fulfill potentially that same job description as you. Now, this at times may be subject to the rigorous nature of companies' relative application forms, recruitment process. But for the vast majority of the people that are listening, if you're working in a remote team, for 90% plus of the roles, if you're in paid media, if you're in SEO, if you're in sales, you're working in a role that in and of itself is a commodity. There are no shortage of people that are in selling or sales. There are no shortage. So what's interesting or powerful to understand, when I've seen the people that perform really well, they tend to, as popularized in a book that I recommend that two books you should read, both by Seth Godin, one called Linchpin, the other one called The Purple Cow. The people that tend to outperform make themselves indispensable. So you have, for example, practically speaking, all of the elements of your role. So a practical example would be if you're going in for a paid media role, there's generally speaking a abundance of people that apply for paid media, focusing specifically on that quadrant, and this applies to any role, that understand how to use Google Ad Manager. It would be an expected part of the role. But people that then can, as an example, be fluent with Google Ad Manager, as well as Google Analytics, as well as TikTok, immediately narrow the field when it comes to their utility. And this is one of the things that people often, when it comes to work, don't always appreciate. The most valuable man or person is often the useful man, and usefulness is derived from your utility. How many things that are seemingly also disparate skills can you connect that you can combine to fundamentally produce unusual outcomes? So what's interesting about the example that I've just given in the paid media example, that is the expected natural breadth or expansion of role. But then if you, for example, combine the skill of paid media with understanding sales copywriting, you then build two skills that are typically in conjunction a little bit more uncommon. So building utility is a really important part of impressing, because then you begin to, and this is what we all want to do, place ourselves in a little bit of a category of one. And often people don't really appreciate that. They focus upon the nature and role of the thing that they were hired to do, which is fine. And the important thing here to understand is that that is expected. And a lot of people also fail on that. They aren't able to competently fulfill the actual nature of their job description. So fulfilling the role of peak performance is doing what is peak performance is not doing what is expected of you. Because doing what is expected of you, and this is going to sound inane or maybe like a tautology, but I'm saying it because a lot of people don't do it. Doing what is expected of you is doing what is expected of you. And often people fail because they don't do what is expected of them. So that's the line items in terms of your role. What am I expected to do as a new sales executive? What am I expected to do as a new account manager? What am I expected to do? So making sure you can fulfill the roles that, or the parts of your job that are encompassed in the description is absolutely key. Now, alongside that, if you're working in a digital and remote team, then it goes without saying, but it still needs to be said, that being extremely fluent and competent with every aspect of the technology stack that comprises working in a remote environment is obvious, but there's still issues at time with people that do apply for distributed and remote roles that do have issues with, and it's always the non-obvious things that sometimes catch people out. So there's, of course, internet connectivity. There's having a HD webcam. There's investing in a good mic. There's ensuring that you have a great background. There's ensuring there's no background noise. There's ensuring there is good speed with your computer. which often people fail upon. They have machines that slow them down, and they're led or anchored by the incapacitated nature of their laptops or desktops because they don't have the requisite levels of RAM, or they've not moved to a solid state hard drive or whatever the next latest and greatest innovation is. So having full use of hardware and software tools is again something that is always notable. And again, we're focusing on what outstanding performance looks like. It's always notably just never a problem in anyone who achieves peak performance. So never any issues from a technical standpoint. So what's interesting in a distributed and remote environment is that it's quite incredible how many people turn up to work and expect to get paid to figure out all of those things whilst they're on the job. So it's like being paid to be a plumber when you say, you know what, can you just lend me a drill and then I'll do the work? It's surprising how many people still have issues in all of those spaces. And when you think about the plumbing environment, that is a ridiculous thing for a plumber to say. So make sure if you want to be successful in any distributed and remote environment that you those are there's those two buckets of basics, right? And we'll continue. The bucket number one is before you apply for a remote role, make sure that you are technologically ready, hardware, software, and there's nuances that people often forget. So as we discussed, the good background, the clear audio, the good ultimately or lack of background noise. The people that perform well have all solved all of these basic problems before they even turn up. And you know that they're prepared. A lot of people say, okay, I'll figure it out as I go along. And you can do that. But time and experience has shown me that they tend not to be the top performers because it signifies a focus and understanding of the fundamental requirements of being successful when it comes to impressing within your first 30 to 60 days. So this is something that absolutely I would advocate. The next thing in terms of the people that tend to achieve success, and if you're watching and you're applying to Pearl Lemon or you already started at Pearl Lemon, is taking the time to go through diligently the entirety of the onboarding materials that are given to you. I see problems or questions pop up that I know full well are contained within onboarding documents, are contained within onboarding, for example, or contained within videos, video training. So those who tend to fundamentally perform well are diligent and take the time outside of work to go through a lot of the onboarding materials or even inside of work, but clearly they pay attention when they're going through the videos and it's noticed and it's noticeable and it's often revealed by the manner of the questions that are asked. So practical examples at Pearl Lemon is if and we have communication training, we have autonomy training. In the autonomy training, there's how to ask for a pay rise. There's how to deal with difficult people. There's how to ultimately ask for additional work if you don't know what to do. There's how to move job roles if you're finding there's a struggle. So these are all examples of things that you do have access to at Pearl Lemon. And I'll see in groups people asking questions that reveals that they've not done the homework. So this is another area of a space where I do often see people fall down. And we continue in terms of what I've seen that success often tends to look like. So we've got the technological side of it. We've got the fulfilling your job description. We've got the engaging with any onboarding materials that you have been provided. And then there's the utility or generating utility in terms of your own usefulness. So looking at areas or pockets outside of your job description that you can begin to help or support with because then that increases overall your usefulness at the company. This is something that we discussed in a different training, how to think like a CEO when it comes to ensuring that you build skills that will have eternal value at whatever company you walk into. So a simple example is having a really good knowledge of Google Sheets, because that will be a skill that will be useful at almost any company that you walk into. So if you can go through the pains of lots of training with Google Sheets, you'll immediately be a relatively useful person in whatever room there's a requirement to use Google Sheets. So there's that all of these areas are definitely things that I've seen that ultimately tend to lead to success. Now we continue. So there's also things that tend to signify those who will be less than successful or not as successful as we like at Pearl Lemon. And when I think about that, you can often, or you can gauge people's thinking by the questions that they ask. So when you are starting at a new company, there's questions that you should probably refrain from asking. And part of it might be that we've done a bad job at Pearl Lemon if these questions still arise. But if you ask questions that relate to how many hours do I need to do? When do I put in my holiday request? Immediately it implies that what is the value that I can take from you? When can I head out of the door? When can I go and do other stuff that's not relevant to the work that you've asked me to do? So these are always signals that, well, you're asking me the wrong questions. So be very mindful of the questions that you're asking. And if those questions haven't been clarified, then it probably means that we've done a bad job. But irrespective of that, if it's not relevant to where you're at Pearl Lemon and you're looking from another company, just keep it in mind from a employee's perspective, they want you to live and breathe the company, because why wouldn't they? They want you to be fully engaged, and within your first week, first impressions matter, and there are fundamentally the right people to ask particular questions, and there's the wrong people to ask particular questions. So knowing how to read the room is really important. So there's questions that you can probably ask sideways or downwards, and there's questions that you can ask up. So where you do have questions that relate to procedural things, when it comes to pay and holidays and all of these types of areas, it's probably wise to engage directly, for example, with the HR team about that, or to engage with another new starter to get a sense of things. But these are not the questions that are in the mind of any of the decision makers at the companies that you work. So they tend to signify the wrong things. They think, well, this is something that I don't really want to hear necessarily. I'll answer it, but this is something also to definitely be mindful of. So that tends to be also something that, if you're thinking about asking it, just knowing who to ask and being mindful of who you ask. Okay, so that's something also to pay attention to. The next bucket, when we talk about reading the room, the people that tend to perform really well are those who understand who the right people are that are influencers and who carry weight and authority. And in seeking to serve those people, you'll immediately tend to elevate. So within any given company, any given environment, any company tends to have stars at a department level, at a company level, and you quite often can quickly understand who the stars are. And the stars are the ones to emulate. The stars are the ones to watch. The stars are the ones to learn from. The stars are the ones to shadow. So you do tend to see that the people that perform well understand these things and begin to mimic, shadow, and to a degree copy behaviors where they see it's relevant. So that's something else that's really, really quite critical. The next element I think that's quite important is And it relates to the company's culture and a sense of the modus operandi. So practically at Pearl Lemon, you'll notice that if you work with me, I send a lot more voice. My voice note to written message ratio is probably 2 to 1. You'll rarely 20 to 1 see me write something that's longer than 2 sentences. So that should be an indicator of the style of behavior that you wish to mimic. So when I talk about mimicry and understanding company culture, there's language, of course. So language is, do people use emojis? Do they not use emojis? Is it formal or is it informal? What does that world look like? Do people swear? Do they not swear? What is the general attitude in the company? Is it all serious, all suits? Is it positive mental aptitude? Is it happy-go-lucky, head in the clouds? Is it formal but friendly? And again, if we've done recruitment properly, then you'll immediately fit like a glove. But this applies to any company, even where they're not publicly advertising these things. Culture always exists. Culture is always part of a company, but it's just about reading the room and observing what people do and the ratios at which people do things. So it's not just, do they use emojis? What kind of emojis do they use? What would mark me out as being weird if I used an emoji? Now, don't get me wrong. Of course, everyone to a degree should always express individualism, and there's always the element of pleasant surprise. And that comes as a part of risk and experience, because these things should always be to some degree experimented with, but not after you read the room and you understand how people do things and at what level they do them. Because, of course, as much as it's important to break the rules and set new standards, if you're attempting to impress and accelerate, part of it is as active assimilation as possible, but assimilating with those people who are already performing or peak performance at the company. So that's the part that becomes important. And then also looking at other things. So at Pearl Lemon, you'll notice that we communicate on WhatsApp. When we send screenshots, we don't send them as attachments. We send them as images so you can immediately open it. When we send documentation, it's always in the form of Google links. And there'll still be people that will fly around here and there that will send a full MP4 file, or send something to download, or send something that's an XLS, indicating that, okay, they've not kind of understood exactly how we operate and how we tend to communicate. So the interesting thing is, impressing in the first 90 days is about a complete combination of all of the little things. And all of the little things matter in the beginning, because most often you don't have, or you haven't had the room or time to demonstrate massive return on investment. Because a paid media person, a salesperson, often isn't expected to generate a sale day one. So what do people look towards when they're looking for evidence that someone can get with the game or pick things up? It's the way that they operate around the tools. It's the way that they work to fit in. It's all of the things that you attribute towards fluency, competency, and that's what then people derive peak performance from. Another area, of course, is looking at things, and this is once you've understood those things, and that can take, for some people, and the peak performers, it can take a day. They come in and they've done their homework, they've read the room, they've understood these things because they took the time to do the homework ahead of starting, or in the evenings and weekends on the evenings and weekends. So within the first week or within the first 2 weeks, or as I said, in exceptional cases, Lydia being one, within the first 2 days, you think, oh, okay, I've got someone who's ultimately cut from a bit of a different cloth in terms of the way and level and speed at which they work and how quickly they understand things. And for those of you who are in the team, of course, you'll appreciate that about Lydia. And she's created huge utility for herself. She isn't an accountant, but she's figured out how to run the company accounts. She isn't head of HR, but she knows how to do all of the recruitment. She isn't or ever has considered herself a salesperson, but she makes catering sales once or twice a month. She doesn't know anything about SalesMate or our sales CRMs, but she sets them up. She negotiates. She gets prices down. She's, for herself, created incredible utility by never being afraid or too arrogant to do anything to enlarge in her skill set. So the payoff is that she's invaluable to the company. So that means probably in 5 years from now, she'll continue to grow in value, and correspondingly, her rewards will be there. And that's come as a consequence of being open to utility. Let me try it. Let me do that. I can do that because the compound value that you pick up over time of being nice, being helpful, gives you then it begins to give you, and this is what we spoke about, right? It gives you nuanced skill sets. It gives you someone who's very difficult to go out and find in the marketplace. So given all of those, for those of you who are watching, given what I've just said, how do I hire for another Lydia? You can't. There's no way. How do you hire someone who says, I need you to learn to run the company accounts. I need you to learn to do some of the sales in catering. I need you to learn how to run catering events remotely. I need you to run the HR department. I need you to do all of these things. Yeah, someone in the comments, for those of you, John said you hired 6 people. Exactly. So do you see, and that's a great example of it, of someone who came in for one particular role, but has made themselves indispensable by the ultimately huge utility that she has to the business. And for reference, I never taught Lydia, or 80% of the things that Lydia has learned has been self-engineered. She knows the accounts better than I do. She knows SalesMate already probably better than I do. So she is headed into that space. And that was right from the beginning, that she read the manuals, she looked at the materials, she upgraded her laptop several times. She probably is still, for example, the only one in the company alongside me has a 64 gig RAM machine, because she said, whoa, I just gained 8 hours a week without doing anything different because my computer runs at light speed. And I said, amazing. Everyone's out here. And of course this is, but you understand it. Everyone's out here still functioning on typewriters while you're working with a keyboard comparatively. Of course, you're going to have a head start. Of course, you're going to get ahead. So the compound effect of all of these little things and having that attitude and approach of being helpful is it just can lead to huge gains over time. And certainly at Pearl Lemon, these are things that I will notice. Absolutely. One of our new sales executives, Shania, has said to me, Deeps, I'm going to go through and do multiple SalesMate tutorials, and I want to be the SalesMate administrator. And she's already taken it upon herself. She already knows things. She's already in contact with the SalesMate account managers. She's already determined that I don't think this dialer is that great. I've already got her into conversations with Lydia to look at switching dialers. By determining to have great utility, she has already placed herself in a bit of a different box, because she's the only person who's said to come, I want to come and solve problems outside of my job description. And most of us think singularly inside our job description. Does that make sense? And that's good, and you should do that, but you are then still remaining a commodity to some degree. There's different scales on the commodity spectrum, if you will, but if you're a paid media person who becomes a very good paid media person, there are other very good paid media people. Does this make sense, everybody? That's not to say you shouldn't become a good paid media person, but we're talking about how to not impress, really. It's about how to fucking excel. And that's a different thing. That's when you start saying, hey, I'm going to play a different game. These guys are out here singularly trying to book sales appointments. I'm out here booking sales appointments, understanding the sales CRMs. And you know what? At the same time, I figure that, Deeps, do you think at some point we want to cold email? I'll say, well, you're brought in to be a cold caller. But again, and this is where, if you want to impress, what is a company trying to achieve? Leads. You're like, Deeps, if I could generate inquiries through cold email, do you think that would be valuable? Of course, because the process doesn't matter. The outcome is more important than the process. And that's why when you think about the journey is worth the destination, we are willing to suffer the knocks on the journey because we're optimizing for a destination. So if you can align with the company's or your department's destination, you can then determine to navigate your own path, which is why I said, as much as you want to assimilate yourself, to create the differential return, you have to understand what you're optimizing towards. And if you say, right, everyone's running this marathon route when we're not actually running, when the distance doesn't matter. So everyone's out here running 26.2 miles around this loop. But I've just understood because I've asked the right questions that all that matters is getting to Rome. I'm going to take a flight. Oh, amazing. It wasn't 4.5 hours, which was our current marathon time. I did it in an hour, 40-minute flight. Boom. You're in a completely different box. Does this make sense, guys, what I'm saying? That most people fall into box one, which is ordinary returns. Ordinary work leads to ordinary returns. But if you're in the business of impressing and excelling, you've got to think differently. And then you've got to understand that there's a different book that you can read, a different playbook to get the result that we're optimizing for. So that's a lot of the fundamentals that I think are important. There's some other truisms, I think. Understand the company culture when it comes to lifestyle, when it comes to hard work, when it comes, and you have to understand if you're a fit for the company. So do we care, does the company care more about hours put in, or does the company care more about results? Does the company care about both? And you have to relate what the company cares about with what you care about. Because if you think that, oh my God, I'm not the kind of person who would ever look at any messages on Saturday because I value my weekends, and that's an amazing thing, and the company absolutely shuts down on a Saturday, then it means it's the right company for you. Because that's great. If you have a company that's small, irrespective of size, if you have a company that has a particular type of culture, then you will tend to do better when you fit in with that culture. So we're a small business, Pearl Lemon. We do a couple of million. We're tiny. It's all comparative. Our culture, and me, if you're listening, I will go and do an 8-hour run on a Saturday. And while I'm running, the team will have heard it. I will be sending voice notes to people about different things to do. And the company, to a decent degree, is a reflection of how I am. And of course, as much as I would respect anyone who wants to take a full weekend off, because you should, and it is your right, naturally, I'm going to optimize for people that are a reflection of myself, because everyone does. Why be the meat eater that then marries a vegan? It just doesn't make sense. The math doesn't work. Of course you could, and there's nothing wrong, but you're probably going to end up being with a meat eater rather than a vegan because it requires lifestyle change. And this also, of course, applies to when you think about it anywhere with clients. If you have clients that message you on a Friday evening and then you don't reply until Monday, I bet your bottom dollar within a month, they'll be looking for a provider who tends to reply because they don't want to wait the entire weekend to just find out, oh, John, any luck sending that report that you promised this morning? Clock in Monday. Hey, yeah, I'll send it to you now. It would kill most people. So you need to look at a company's culture. And at Pearl Lemon, the truth is that's our culture. I'm British Indian. I've grown up with a family who work ultra hard. My parents, 100-hour work weeks, and it is normal. That's just what you do to put food on the table. My parents would work. And that's why it's important to understand these things and to observe these things and to understand if that's what you want in your own journey. Because that's part of the DNA that I have at Pearl Lemon, you know. My mum would work 2 jobs. My dad would work all of the hours he could get at Heathrow Airport. And my dad would rarely be at a dinner table because he was always at work. And he would come home from work. And then sometimes my mum would head off into the night to work at the local bowling alley because we needed to make ends meet. And it was just normal to work a 12-hour day. It was normal to work 6 days a week. That was what you did. That was why I got a job when I was 12 years old, because I said, oh, I want to go to the cinema. And I said, my mum said, well, great, you're going to have to make your own money. There's no money to go to the cinema. I said, okay, how much can you give me? £5. I said, okay, well, the ticket's £6.20. She said, okay, well, you're going to need to find the money. Get a job. As I did. So that's the culture. So understanding a company has stories, and cultures often derive from actual stories, because stories bring so stories then manifest into ways of working and styles of communication, and understanding all of these things will help you excel in any company that you're in. And what tends to happen in people that achieve expected performance, and remember, expected is not exceptional. Expected is expected. And to achieve exceptional performance, it's worthy to think about all of these things. And I would tend to say that even if you start ticking some of these boxes, because ticking all of them is, of course, a difficult thing to do, but even if you start ticking some of these boxes, you already begin moving yourself into that coveted category of one. So, well, okay, I want to be that person that's irreplaceable in any room that I walk into, because that person will tend to beat the market. And the market is every other person who applied for your role, who could be replacing you in a couple of years from now. If, for example, you focus on just doing what's in your job description, and then someone else comes along who can do what you can do, but then there's all this other stuff that they can do that makes them a much more valued asset. And that's often how people achieve, of course, superior returns. As a company grows, they might say, okay, well, there's a different skill requirement. So anyway, of all of that being said, if you are part of Pearl Lemon, welcome. I hope this has been useful for you. And I think that at Pearl Lemon particularly, irrespective of your time here, let's just say, I hope, expect and believe you're going to learn a heck of a lot, not only about what to do at work in terms of the role and the specifics of it, but how to be a better employee, a better entrepreneur, a better human, and just, better at life in general. I think that, they're things that, irrespective of the time you spend with us, I'm excited to join you in your journey of success for however long you remain with us. And, my goal is for that to be, if you are here, as long as possible. I create this content because my goal is to optimize for a lifetime return on investment. And that's measured in the relationship that we build and everything else that follows in terms of the acquisition of skill, the return of results, and continued developing relationship. So, welcome.